Good morning. This is News for your Sunday.
Good morning. I'm Pat Lawson-Muse. Addiction can happen to anyone without regard for race, gender, income, education, or faith. September is National Recovery Month, and the Capital City Campaign is engaged in an effort to help support individuals and families in the grips of addiction. Joining us to talk about it are Garcia Williams, Executive Director of the Medi Community Resource Center, and David Mays is Outreach Coordinator for the DC Recovery Community Alliance. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Good morning, Pat, and thank you so much for having us.
Garcia, tell me about your organization and how you are engaged with the city's effort to address the issue of addiction.
Well, Pat, thank you so much. The Medi Community Resource Center is proud to be among the founding members of the Partners in Care Network. Among our founding members are the Medical Home Development Group, the Psychiatric Institute of Washington, and we are proud to have also the DC Recovery Community Alliance with us. And as you mentioned earlier, addiction has no preference for age, race, economics, or anything, but our mission is to make certain that we create connections, provide supportive services, and vital and life-saving efforts to help those who are engaged in the throes of addiction.
David, we know it can take a whole village to get those who are struggling with addiction into treatment, to get them redirected and to help them successfully complete that journey to recovery. Tell us how DCRCA is doing that.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. DC Recovery Community Alliance is an organization that's been around for about 12 years now. And what we do basically is provide recovery support services through recovery coaching, access to resources that are available to any DC resident. So in essence, what we do is provide sort of a wraparound service to assist people in getting their lives back together.
What are some of those wraparound services?
Well, job services, helping folks get, information like Social Security cards or driver's licenses or just access to housing. There are a number of services that the DC government provides that simply are difficult to access sometimes. So we basically act as recovery coaches to assist people in that regard.
Garcia, the Capital City Campaign is part of a month-long observance involving a number of partner organizations, some of which you've already named, working together to support recovery services. And you are kicking off the month-long campaign with an interesting fundraising effort. Tell us about that.
Yes, the Ducks are coming to Washington. So we've engaged with a team of supporters in a fundraising effort to adopt ducks. And the adoption for the duck is just a way of providing financial resources to assist us in doing the exact work that David described to you earlier. So throughout the month, we've kicked off a series of events at the Psychiatric Institute of Washington. They have the observance of International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st, which was a very effective launch to this campaign. And throughout the month, we're going to be sharing information through our social media platforms, which will culminate in an event on September 18th. And Pat, as you can well imagine, right now with the COVID pandemic and the transition into a virtual format, we've maintained some focus on how we want to do this and make it effective. So we'll be hosting a virtual event on September 18th with the DCRCA group and helping to create awareness and more focus on what we can do as a community to assist those with the needs in the addiction population.
And tell us how the Adopt a Duck campaign works.
Well, there are a variety of different ways that you can do that. We do have our website, and we're going to be sharing that information very shortly, but individuals can adopt a single duck, and which we advise that a duck shouldn't be by itself, but they can go online through a portal and adopt a duck for one, a flock, or several, and that way they can provide the financial support and resources to do that. And it's a very simple, straightforward process, but most people have shared with us that they are interested in supporting us and have been able to give us that level of support by logging on and adopting the ducks in those various categories.
Garcia, I have to ask, why a duck?
Well, the duck is really a concept, and many organizations across the country have used this fundraising platform. And in its original format, it's usually done in an outdoor setting as a water-based event. And they're little ducks. I just happen to have a little one here who is so lonely and needs to be adopted in some way. But in a traditional setting, they would dump the rubber ducks into a water-based event. And as the ducks cross the finish line, they would be dubbed a winner in this race. But since we've had to pivot to a virtual event, we're doing a random selection of those winners. And as many of those adoptions that take place, there are many of those awards that can be obtained through that process.
All right, very rather lighthearted strategy to deal with a very serious issue. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll continue our talk about the Capital City campaign to help with recovery. Stay with us. Recovery from addiction. And David, this campaign is closely aligned with Mayor Bowser's Live Long DC campaign, which also embraces the National Capital Region Compact to combat opioid addiction. How is the district doing in the battle against opioid abuse?
Well, the district is not doing well. There is an epidemic right now with opioid abuse, prescription and street. Lots of the problems with the opioid is that it's being cut with fentanyl, which is a highly addictive opiate synthetic. So the bottom line is that it is an epidemic. The average opioid user or heroin user in DC, sort of looks like me. So it's an African-American community issue substantially, but it's one in which, we do a lot of work in terms of informing the community. We have community outreach projects, and everything we do right now is trying to combat the scourge of opioids and heroin abuse in D.C.
And David, mental health has become such a visible problem in our communities. It's, of course, been magnified by the pandemic. Tell us about the services that you offer to support clients experiencing mental health crises that may be associated with addiction, and how much of a barrier does stigma continue to present for people who need to seek help?
Well, stigma is an obstacle. I mean, most folks, when they have a problem, they're not excited about sharing that, and they tend to isolate, and that just causes the problem to get worse. The pandemic was a huge problem that people were forced to isolate, and one of the biggest problems we find is that when people come into recovery, their self-esteem is fairly low. We have to try to encourage people to think more positively, work on their mental wellness, because if you see yourself as a viable human being, you tend to perform a little differently. So for us, we just want to assist people with understanding what is available in recovery, what treatment is, and how we try to get you back on the life that you intend to live. So we support people in that regard.
All right, and Garcia, give us a web address for people who want to get information about the event on September 18th.
Thank you so much. They can reach out to us through adoptaduckforrecovery.org, and there's lots of information on that website. But Pat, if I may, I just want to tie back into one point that you mentioned earlier, that the Duck campaign is a different approach to how we may be able to provide support. As David mentioned earlier, we are in the throes of this epidemic, and whatever we can do to unite our community, to minimize the stigma, to really focus on the health and well-being of our community. So we are taking a slightly lighthearted approach in some cases, but it's for a very serious matter, because we all have to come together to understand the everyday struggles and what we can do as a community to overcome addiction and help those who have the greatest need.
All right. It's such an important issue, and it's such important work that you and your partners are doing. Thanks so much for joining us, Garcia Williams and David Mays. And coming up next, the power of a dream celebration to benefit at-risk youngsters. We'll be right back.